If you get a noisy bath fan, there's actually an easy way to service the motors on these things. In this case, we're going to be using 3-in-1 Blue Label oil. This is specifically made for electric motors. So we're going to be using this to lubricate this Aubrey 7550. As you can hear, it is a little noisy. The average bath fan will have a setup similar to this layout. We'll have the blower assembly on a metal plate like this, and there's your electric motor right here. In the case of this fan, there is an oil port. That little stuff right there is for the oil. But in case it doesn't have it, you can also oil it from here. Like this. Let it run for a little bit. Then wipe out the excess oil. But for those with oil ports, you can also do this. Just be a little gentle on the oil port itself until you see the oil getting absorbed. That's for the back bearing. If this bearing is covered, all you gotta do is take out these screws to disassemble the shaft assembly and then get to the back of the oil port. To get to the other bearing, it will be necessary to take out the impeller unless your oil has a small spout. So for most cases, all you gotta do is just lift up this blade or impeller. In the case of this unit, I actually have to take out the motor from the mounting plate to access the front bearing, as it does have an oil port. But this also works with any other bath fan using a similar mounting system like this. We could also try to oil it like this if you want, although that's just a quick way. We are now at the bare motor after disassembling this Aubrey 7550. So let's get to business. So like I said, like this one, this has an oil port, so all you gotta do is just put the oil into the oil port until, you know, it absorbs enough of it. Just try not to get oil into the frame or into the windings, because that's a bad sign. Always try to get into the ports only. But let's say if your motor doesn't have oil ports, the other ways, like this, as I mentioned. With this one, you could just do it like this and then let the motor run for a few seconds until, you know, the oil seeps in enough. The other way is disassembling the motor assembly. Before you disassemble the rotor assembly, make sure to note which direction the shaft was facing, as if you get it the wrong way, it will run in reverse. So make sure to note down the correct orientation. Now all you want to do is just take out the assembly, and then in this case, so you see these bearings, make sure you don't lose these washers if there's any. So in here you put a little bit of oil directly into the wicks. That's for the first wick. Then carefully take out this stator. You really don't want to be too harsh to it, because you could actually pop out the bearing and then it's goodbye fan motor. So be very, very careful with these, as you know, this can actually cause the bearing to pop out. If you did this procedure correctly, the bearing should not pop out. As you can see, safely removed without the bearing popping out at all. So you do the same thing with this bearing. Right in the gaps between the bearing and the housing is the wick that holds the oil. Usually these so-called permanently lubricated motors have enough oil to last around 5 years of operation. That is, you know, continuous operation. But of course, the conditions like humidity and etc. can affect how long the oil retention will last. So it's always a good idea to still oil the motor once you start, you know, hearing rumbling or some squeaking sounds, as that means that you need to lubricate the motor. Just let the oil, sit in for a few minutes, and once you're done, you could just start reassembling the motor. Before you run your fan, if the shaft feels a little stiff, all you have to do is tap it a few times, and that will get the bearings lined up correctly. And now you could reassemble your fan assembly. Now with your fan reassembled, give it a test run. Of course, you may still have some minor rattling. For example, if your fan has a flap like this one does, as this flap is meant to move, so it opens when the fan is running and it closes when there's no airflow. So if it has a flap like that, it is normal to have a little bit of rattling, but you could also dampen some of the vibrations by getting rubber pads, and that should help with reducing vibrations on the unit. You can also do the same thing with getting some washer shaped rubber pads for the motor assembly, so that way there's improved dampening, which should help with vibrations. So let's give this a run. You can see the main rattling from the motor is already gone, so all you have left is just the moving parts, but you can see the spin down is improved. And here's a final run. That's a lot better than it was at first.